Welcome to this explainer on Kautilya's Arthashastra. It is an ancient Indian text, but make no mistake, it remains an absolute masterclass in strategic realism. Today, we are going to explore a treatise that has shaped political and military thought for millennia. We'll be examining it not just as a piece of ancient history, but as a living, breathing blueprint for statecraft, governance, and ultimate survival.
Think about this for a second. Imagine a 2,000-year-old manual covering literally everything, from espionage networks and military formations to complex diplomacy and state survival. Written by Kautilya, who is often identified as Chanakya, the brilliant advisor to the Mauryan Empire. This text proves that the fundamental rules of power simply do not change. This is Kautilya's timeless legacy, and we are going to break it down together.
We will be exploring this manual across 6 core areas today. 1. The foundation of power. 2. Intelligence and administration. 3. The shield and sword. 4. Finance and war logistics. 5. The circle of states. And finally, number 6. Victory, peace, and survival.
Let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, the foundation of power, the king and the discipline of rule.
You know, it is fascinating that Kautilya doesn't actually begin his military manual with warfare. He begins with the ruler's character. And why? Because strategic failure almost always begins at the very top. The ruler is the executive center of the state apparatus, entirely responsible for the welfare, justice, and defense of the people. They must remain perpetually awake to threats. In the Arthashastra, holding power is a highly demanding, professional task governed by systems and skilled advisors. It is certainly not a ceremonial rite driven by personal impulse.
Moving on to Section 2, Intelligence and Administration, the internal machinery.
Looking at the internal structure, Kautilya warns us that a kingdom survives only when its officers are meticulously tested. Military power rests entirely on this domestic strength. Think of it this way. A state that cannot maintain its agriculture, its trade, and its public order cannot possibly sustain an army for long. The rear area turns revenue and basic production into actual national security. You just cannot separate economics from defense. Now, a ruler cannot manage an empire alone, but blind trust, that is a massive vulnerability. Trust must be systematically verified through constant observation and layered intelligence.
The crucial point here is that operational security, loyal administration, and layered intelligence checks form the true backbone of state survival. A kingdom does not endure simply because one single leader is brilliant. It endures because its institutions are robust, information flows accurately, and officials are judged on strict, unwavering competence.
Which brings us to Section 3, the shield and sword, military organization and terrain. Turning to the physical defenses of the realm, Kautilya gives meticulous, serious attention to border security. He treats a physical fort not just as a static stone wall, but as a dynamic center of resilience, storage, and command. This is absolutely essential for outlasting a siege. Furthermore, he never viewed terrain as just a mere backdrop for battles. He treated forests, rivers, and mountain passes as actual weapons, demanding his commanders think spatially. Strategy is dictated by the landscape and how you can maneuver and supply your forces within it.
The ancient fourfold army consisted of infantry, cavalry, chariots, and elephants. But organization here is a force multiplier. Kautilya was obsessed with carefully matching these specific forces to the terrain and the mission. This ensures that discipline defeats mere numbers. A massive, unorganized army is weak, but a carefully organized, highly trained force, that is decisive.
Let's move to Section 4, Finance and War Logistics, the fuel.
It is a harsh reality, but armies simply do not march on courage alone. They depend heavily on the intimate, unbreakable link between battlefield success and rigorous economic planning. Logistics is the absolute center of military power. As modern as it sounds, Kautilya knew perfectly well that a military campaign relies entirely on stored resources, uninterrupted supply chains, and a highly reliable taxation system. If the state's treasury is empty, the sword cannot be swung. It's really that simple.
But here's an interesting contrast. Open battle? That's really only half the picture. Before a single soldier even steps onto the field, Kautilya emphasizes the unseen struggle. We're talking about information warfare, espionage, psychological pressure, and sabotage. Intelligence gathering is treated as a permanent, active arm of the state, explicitly designed to weaken the enemy from within long before the armies actually meet.
Now let's dive into Section 5, the circle of states, the chessboard.
The Arthashastra teaches us that to survive in a world of rival powers, military strategy cannot exist in isolation. It has to be seamlessly linked to a broader, highly calculated architecture of diplomacy. This is the Mandala Theory. It's a realist concept where alliances and hostilities are driven purely by interest, fear, and the balance of power, not idealism. The core assumption is that states sharing a border will naturally compete for resources, making them rivals. Meanwhile, the state bordering your enemy is your natural ally. It is pure, calculated geopolitics.
Because of this constantly shifting chessboard, a ruler must remain completely flexible. You have to act dynamically based on keen observation and shifting international realities. You must know exactly when to negotiate a peace, when to bide your time, when to build an alliance, and of course, when to strike. Dogmatic, rigid thinking in foreign policy leads directly to a nation's ruin.
Let's look at our final section, number 6, Victory, Peace, and Survival, the long game.
Kautilya possessed the profound understanding that war is never an end in itself. Winning a battle is relatively simple compared to the sheer complexity of what follows. Victory is incomplete and frankly dangerous unless it produces lasting stability. Strategy continues long after the battle ends, forming a continuous chain from battlefield triumph to lasting governance. You must reconcile with the conquered population, establish fair administration, and set up deterrence. War is merely one phase of statecraft, not the entirety of it.
The ultimate lesson of this entire explainer is that a state, or really any massive organization, is strongest when it is flawlessly organized, perpetually alert, and governed by cold realism rather than hopeful fantasy. Kautilya's enduring message is that survival is never guaranteed by right. It is engineered through structure and intelligence.
As we wrap up this ancient manual of power, I'd like you to consider Kautilya's timeless wisdom. Ask yourself, are your own organizations, systems, and mindsets truly prepared for the unseen struggles of tomorrow? True power requires unyielding discipline and immense foresight. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the profound strategic depths of the Arthashastra.